I will openly admit I was unaware of what lobbying really meant at all. When I graduated college, I think I had the same perception of many people about lobbying. It's men drinking whiskey, smoking cigars, backroom deals, corruption, fraud, waste, abuse. And in reality, it's nothing like that. The reason that I'm optimistic is that I've spent the last 3 years meeting builders. And I will tell you, I have not met a builder that has not admitted to me that spray foam is the best insulation product. What they say is that it's more expensive than the alternatives. That's a huge opportunity. So he calls me and says, we just spent, almost $1 billion on spray foam. I know very little about this product. You know everything about the product. You're going to be my best friend until I can successfully advocate for this industry. If I handed you a piece of paper and said, write a building code, you wouldn't start with R value. The test was tailor-made for the fiberglass industry. We realized this was a crisis and we needed to come up with a solution. And the RDH report and the unvented attic roof deck R value came directly out of the mandate for an R60 ceiling insulation requirement in the IECC. The spray foam industry was the one insulation industry sector that actually opposed that requirement.
When I got into the industry, 2 and 3 inches was the norm. Now we're spraying 3 and 5 in closed cell foam, the more expensive of the two products. And it's like, if we don't put the brakes on this, we're going to be priced right out of the market to where we're only going to be using it in small, select areas. What is the next step in slaying this gigantic dragon that's in the room?
So that's step one. Step two is we have a proposal those are our 2 big projects that we want to get underway this year.
That's amazing. So we could be within a groundbreaking shift within the next three years, what you describe as the holy grail of work. And I think all of us want to know what that is.
What I call the holy grail of the insulation industry is...
So if you're listening to what Stephen has just said, he laid out a huge revelation bomb just now. And I want to break it down for everybody into the most strictest, simplest terms. He is talking about a code book that is written for spray foam. Hello, everybody. Mike with Spray Jones coming to you with another episode. This is the Think Spray Foam podcast, and today we are going to be talking about a massive, important subject, and we have a very, very special and distinguished guest. We are all familiar with government regulations as in the spray foam industry. If you're a builder, renovator, even building code inspector, you're familiar with building code, frustrations on what we can and can't do. You've seen the energy that it takes to fight these things. It takes a special knack, to get into government bureaucracy and rules and regulations. And today, I'm going to introduce you to the man that is spearheading these battles in the United States and in Canada. He is uniquely qualified. I couldn't write a better resume for this individual. Chemistry major out of University of Maryland, did a stint at EPA working in the Toxic Substance Control Act, American Coatings Association, American Chemistry Council, worked with Huntsman pushing advocacy for spray foam, and recently, as of January 2025, he is now the president of Spray Foam Coalition. So please welcome with me today in our studio, the man that you're going to hear a lot of, Stephen Wieroniey. Hello, Stephen.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thanks for coming in here today. You are leading a very unique facet of the spray foam industry that we don't understand until something goes right, something goes wrong. Government can make or break you. They can legislate, they can pass things, and all of a sudden make your life more difficult. And that's why we need people out there educating and lobbying. And that's what you're doing in Ottawa. Or Ottawa. Ottawa is where Canada is. That's what you're doing in Washington, D.C. Tell us a bit about how this came to be. You went to school and you got a chemistry major at University of Maryland. Give us your run-up on how you got into this unique position. And all of this before age 40, by the way.
Yeah, when I left the University of Maryland, I will openly admit I was unaware of what lobbying really meant, and the fact that trade associations existed at all. And when I graduated college, I think I had the same perception of many people about lobbying. It's men drinking whiskey, smoking cigars, backroom deals, corruption, fraud, waste, abuse, to use terms that are floating around DC frequently these days. And in reality, it's nothing like that. lobbying is having a subject matter expertise and being the voice of a company, an industry, a position, an advocacy objective, and taking that position to regulators, to legislators, to the executive branch, to different agencies that are impacting the industry. So that's a long opening, but I graduated at the University of Maryland, and it was the height of the Great Recession,
Right.
and I was looking to use my chemistry degree to get into government. I grew up in the Washington D.C. area, and the idea of working for government is quite common,
Mm.
and it's something that many people do. And there's a big bulky website called USA Jobs, and if you've ever looked at it, it's a monster. It's hard to get through to the hiring people. I
Mm.
don't know if it's intentional or if it's just bureaucracy at its worst. That's a discussion for someone else. So ultimately, I was looking for a job, and I was probably buying some on Craigslist, and I saw a job section on Craigslist, and I saw this ad for a contracting position at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I thought that would be a good segue into a government career. And I got hired as a contractor under the Toxic Substances Control Act, and learned all about how the EPA regulates new chemicals. Many folks in the non-governmental organization, environmental community feel that chemistry and chemicals aren't regulated in this country. It's not true. It's never been true. Well, post 1976, it's never been true. I won't speak to what happened prior to those years, but once TSC was in place, we've been regulating every new chemical that came to the market. Something well over 40,000 chemicals have gone through that program. Spent a couple years there and was really trying to leave the contracting world and become a full-fledged government employee. And there were still hiring freezes, and that USA Jobs website was still a problem. Trying to get through to the belly of the beast, even though I was in the belly of the beast, was still problematic. And I was aware that Congress was considering amending TSCA, but I was unaware of how to be a part of it. And again, through Craigslist, shockingly, I found a job for Big Paint, the American Coatings Association. The building at the time is this massive mansion right on 15th Street in Northwest DC. And I walked up to the building, and I was like, there is no way I'm qualified to walk into those doors. And I went around the block, and I said, you know what? Let's go for it. And walked up and opened this massive steel door and walked into this mansion. Turns out that that building was the home of the Secretary of State and the Vice President and the Russian ambassador, dating back into the 1800s. And the paint industry bought it during the Great Depression, but I was totally in the right spot. I was just nervous. Walked in, had a great interview, and ended up working and being hired as a lobbyist. So I engaged the paint industry and helped them navigate the reforms of TSCA and a whole host of other chemical and health and safety regulations. During that time, I got very close to colleagues at the American Chemistry Council.
Mm.
And after spending 5 or so years at Paint, I was hired to come over and work at ACC under the Center for the Polyurethanes Industry. And what took me there was a state regulatory program called the California Safer Consumer Products Program. And the first product that they were regulating was spray foam insulation.
Really?
Now, when yep, when I walked into that building for the interview, actually take that back. 2 weeks before the interview, I had no idea what spray foam was. I was thinking kits and cans,
Yep.
Dow, great stuff, the things you buy in Home Depot, products that most consumers are aware of. I started reading about spray foam and, learned about high pressure foam and, the hoses and all sorts of things. And went in the interview, and I had memorized all sorts of facts and figures about spray foam equipment and how long the hoses could be and the pressure and the heat. None of that came up in the interview. I don't know why I was so focused on that, but I wanted to go in and really show that I could grow and step out of paint and into a whole nother industry. I had no idea how much of a part of my life spray foam would become
Yeah.
after that date. So I spent 5 years at ACC. My role was split between the Center for the Polyurethanes Industry and doing all of their advocacy and functioning as the executive director of the original version of the Spray Foam Coalition.
Hmm.
And 5 wonderful years there, and I was probably very close to the end of my advocacy days with spray foam until Huntsman reached out and said, "Hey, we know that there's a huge opportunity to do more at the state level. Why don't you come here to Huntsman and do that advocacy for us?" And I had never looked at corporate life as an avenue for me. I thought I was a trade association guy through and through, and I would go do something else at ACC or work for another industry. And I said, this sounds really interesting. And my boss, he wasn't my boss yet, but Kevin Gunderson was a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, I'll help you become a better lobbyist, and you'll help Huntsman promote spray foam." And I said, "Well, let's go for it." So I went and did 2.5 years at Huntsman, and we started a campaign solely focused on state advocacy with spray foam. That's where the building code meets the road. When you adopt a model code, it's meaningless until it's implemented at the state level. And we figured there was opportunities to have a surgical approach to promote spray foam, and we were successful. We passed 5 or 6 bills in 2 years, starting from zero. We had no lobbyists, we had no footprint. So to go from that and be successful that quickly was something I was really proud of.
So Kevin Gunderson says, come on over. He headhunts you, Stephen, to come on over. And you didn't join like a tribe of lobbyists. Like, hey, welcome to the room. Here's all the guys that we have. He handles the West. He handles the South. He handles the East. You're going to be sending. There was none of that. You were just sort of a lone wolf.
Well, Huntsman had Kevin is the vice president of government affairs for Huntsman, so he's the main lobbyist for the corporation.
Okay.
I was hired to be the head lobbyist for Huntsman Building Solutions.
Right.
So there was just me.
Just you.
My boss he's a federal lobbyist and knows enough about spray foam to be effective, but he was not the prevailing subject matter expertise. That's why I came in. So it was just me.
So it's just you there. I'm shocked that our industry does not have more people out there doing what you're doing.
If you meet Kevin or if you hear him talk about me, he likes to say I'm the world's best spray foam lobbyist. And my joke that went along with that was, well, I'm the world's only spray foam lobbyist.
That's
so
what I'm talking about.
By de facto, we're both accurate, but that's the joke that we use to punt off of each other quite frequently.
You're species specific, one off. To our viewers,
that's true. There's a couple other folks now that are stepping into the space, which is good. But yeah, as of 2022, it was really just me.
Wow. Now, the reason I want to appeal to our listeners right now today, why this is incredibly important. Don't switch your brain off. This isn't boring stuff. This is important stuff. A side story here is in 2008, January of 2008, I received a phone call from the city that we worked in that nobody generally wants to get. And that was, we're not going to let spray foam be put in the buildings until we've conducted a more thorough review. Like they were letting it in, but they would not allow it to be a vapor barrier, closed cell 2-pound foam. They were not going to recognize it as a vapor barrier. And they were not going to allow any unvented roof details whatsoever until further notice, and told me we are going to kick this up to the provincial level to have a provincial review, which would be the equivalent of a state review, right? And that it would be an opinion paper only. It would be non-binding. That took 120 days for them to do that. In the meantime, we were basically didn't have spray foam, closed cell foam as a vapor barrier, and couldn't put it to the roof deck. Now, fortunately for me, how I financially survived that attack, that was an attack. Like, they weren't attacking me. It was an attack just on the industry, okay? They were doing it out of fear. They had some bad spray foam, closed cell spray foam jobs. They had to differentiate between what was fact and fiction, what was a bad install versus a bad specification of the product. And they didn't know. They were just truly ignorant to what was going on. And so they took 120 days to review it. And at that point, every single building science expert came out of the woodwork, and that's where we could have absolutely used somebody like you. So to our listeners and viewers, this is super important because you don't want to get that call. You don't want to find out that what was previously approved is no longer approved and your market is just going to go and get closed. So these are a big deal. We're busy out there spraying foam and speccing it and getting it into jobs. But meanwhile, we need people on the forefront pushing it, just like what Stephen here is doing. And this is why this is so vitally important today, is because government can make or break you. They can decide something and tomorrow you're out of business if they decide the wrong thing. So this is an
No,
important,
that's
important
absolutely
discussion.
correct. Yeah. We like to think of us as living the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution every day. It is our right to petition our government and speak on behalf of companies and give industry a voice, because if you're not telling your story, someone else is.
Amen.
And
That's exactly
it's
correct.
as simple as that.
Absolutely. And that is why Think Spray Foam is trying to set a positive narrative and bring the experts on to discuss what's going on from a first standpoint. I I first saw your name in March of 2022. I was called by my supplier, BSF, and they said, "Hey, we've just had this great victory." Well, backing up to our story, we took 120 days to fight what was going on. I call it a fight because that's what it felt like. It was educating the people that had the authority over us to see that spray foam, closed cell spray foam was a vapor barrier, could be spray foam non-vented, and that gave birth to these engineered technical documents. It was a landmark ruling, well, opinion paper at the time. It went Canada-wide, and it gave us the regs to be able to put spray foam non-vented to the roof. But then all of a sudden in March of 2022, I get called and they say, "Hey, Mike, have you seen the RDH Building Sciences new review on spray foam non-vented to the underside of a roof deck?" And I said, "No, I thought that fight was already won. Like, I know when our document went out, it went coast to coast, and a lot of the other provinces used it because precedent had been set where we were, so they were going to okay it." At the top of the page was this name, and it was with American Chemistry Council, and it was Stephen Wieroniey, and was like, okay, what is this? Who is this? Why is this American up here fighting something in Alberta, Canada? And that just, I was fascinated by that document. 17 pages. I did a video on it called Greatest Intel Drop. How did that come to be? Like, that's what you're doing, and that's why it's so important. How did that come to be, Stephen?
So the unvented attic is a key differentiator between spray foam and other insulation materials.
Absolutely.
I will be intellectually honest here and demonstrate or state implicitly that you can build a fiberglass unvented attic. You can do it with cellulose, I think.
Mm-hmm.
NAMA, the North American Insulation Manufacturers, John Mansville, Owen Corning, they have solutions for unvented attics with fiberglass insulation.
Right.
I do believe that that is a difficult install, and the preeminent solution for an unvented attic is spray foam. That is a differentiator that is as close to a truth as anything in this world. If you look at the U.S. model code, or really the International Energy Conservation Code, which is essentially a domestic model code, you'll see that there is no insulation requirement for an unvented attic. Unvented attics and vented attics, in terms of energy efficiency, are created equally in the code. If you have right now, if you built an unvented attic prescriptively and a vented attic prescriptively, you'd have to put the same amount of insulation in the attic in both installs. This idea really started during the adoption of the 2021 IECC. The energy efficiency community pushed an R60 insulation ceiling requirement.
Right.
R60 is a massive amount of fiberglass, but it's even more in terms of spray foam, just in terms of material cost. I mean, that is, what are we talking, like almost 10 inches of closed cell?
Yeah.
That's a massive amount of foam.
And in fiberglass, you're talking about 18 inches. And there's not, unless it's specifically built, there is no physical space to put that in. You need a raised rafter heel, and the lower cord, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the lower cord can't take that much weight pulling down on it. You've actually gone past what the trusses are designed to support.
I'd have to get an expert opinion, but I've heard folks mull around that point. I've never seen, the actual data, but I've heard that a number of times. So we were looking at the code, and we just said, no builder in their right mind is going to put R60 in the attic if you're doing an unvented attic. You're going to use the performance pathway. And the performance pathway of the code is great, but at some point, when you build 10,000 houses, 20, 50, 100, a million houses, at what point do you say, that's great that the performance code allows it, but this should be the Staples easy button where you can just smack it
That was
and be
easy.
done? Why should a more energy efficient home design not get credit for that in the prescriptive side of the code? That is the rationale for the RDH report. So what we did when the Spray Foam Coalition was still at the American Chemistry Council was hire an engineering firm to find the point of equivalency between the energy efficiency of an unvented attic having ducts and conditioned space and a vented fiberglass attic that does not have ducts and conditioned space. And they did some series of complicated modeling runs and found the point of equivalency. And that RDH report has a nice chart of how much you can lower the insulation requirement and not increase energy consumption. And if you look in the cold climates, I think it was something like 79% was the threshold. The coalition made an educated decision to not go that low. One of the issues with this proposal is that the energy efficiency community likes to call it a rollback because you're reducing the R value that's mandated. I don't like a rollback. I call it what it is. It's a right sizing. We are right sizing the amount of insulation so the consumer is buying something that they actually see a benefit from. If you put an R60 unvented attic into a consumer's home and they're willing to pay for it, how much insulation do you think you've overcharged them for? I don't know what the number is, but I'm sure we could do the math. I've always heard around R49, regardless of the insulation, the cost benefit is hitting that limit of zero. It doesn't ever, it will probably never hit zero, but it'll be that perpetual,
Yep.
sliding scale. And we realized this was a crisis and we needed to come up with a solution. And the RDH report and the unvented attic roof deck R value came directly out of the mandate for an R60 ceiling insulation requirement in the IECC. The spray foam industry was the one insulation industry sector that actually opposed that requirement. Everyone else supported it. And we said, this is not a way that we should be building homes in the United States.
So why Alberta? Why did the report get done for Alberta versus Montana? Just curious.
Well, the report was done on all 8 U.S. climate zones,
Okay.
all 8 IECC climate zones. The reason that we went to Alberta and that you saw it in Alberta first is that Alberta has a specialized process to have a specific code change adopted mid-code cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So the Canadian approach is they update the code every 5 years. In the US, we do it every 3 years.
Right.
So we were off cycle in the US and we were off cycle in Canada. And the folks in Alberta were interested and they had a process that we could take advantage of. At the time, the coalition wasn't ready to start going to states and being involved with the legislature and being involved with their technical process. Our technical consultant is Canadian and he knew the Alberta process well. And part of lobbying is identifying opportunities to win and win quickly.
Right.
It's easy to go and be everywhere all at once and be 30% effective in every state. We've taken a very targeted approach, and when we see opportunity, we focus in. We're hyper focused, and we ultimately make changes. So we're happy that Alberta adopted that requirement. The name of that process, standard dev or something like that. It's some odd name. That's why you started to see that approach in Alberta first. It was just a timing. But the report is really for the entire North American market.
Well, and then we've got to get the word out more on that. That's why we're having these sit downs and these discussions and producing this type of media. Okay, what is Spray Foam Coalition? We've been talking about it. We've been saying this word. What is it? How did it get started?
Yep, the Spray Foam Coalition is a trade association representing the interests of spray foam systems houses or manufacturers. Simply put, the coalition started in around end of 2010 because we had a similar challenge that you faced in Alberta in 2008. The US EPA, the US Occupational Health and Safety Administration, and NIOSH and a few other government agencies were raising concerns about the use of spray foam in residential buildings, and really probably commercial buildings as well. I should probably be more broad there. The manufacturers needed a place where they could come together and have difficult conversations about raw materials, emissions, worker health and safety, and they needed expertise to do it. And when you have a chemical crisis in the United States, the American Chemistry Council is the place to go. When it comes to lobbying and subject matter expertise in the chemical space, it's the big leagues. It's the MLB. It's the show. And when I got hired there, I felt like I had achieved something meaningful in my career, and I'm glad that my career has continued to grow since then. But that was quite an accomplishment to be seen as providing value to an organization like that. So ACC brings together the spray foam manufacturers and helps them work with EPA, NIOSH, OSHA to answer questions that they had about worker health and safety and implement product stewardship programs that previously existed but were manufacturer specific. Every manufacturer had product stewardship, but there was not an overarching set of industry guidance. So the industry put together these documents and worked with OSHA, created spraypolyurethane.org, created a worker health and safety training program on the basic practices to ensure that you're protected when installing foam. So the coalition really started as a technical chemical health and safety focused organization. The coalition found its footing and realized that there is a huge opportunity when they work together, they can accomplish big things. After they solved some of these major health and safety crises, they started to look at what they could do next. And they wanted to be more of an advocacy organization
Right.
and help change building policy for the better. You mentioned a couple times how the government can harm your business.
Yeah.
But there's a double-edged sword to this, and that government can help grow your business as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And when it comes to insulation, I'm a firm believer that the mandate for energy efficiency drives growth.
Right.
Without a mandate for energy efficiency, you would see builders put in the amount of insulation that they deem sufficient. And what they deem sufficient may be different than what a consumer deems sufficient or what the current governmental mandates are. And I'm sure we can talk later about the perspective of builders. That's something that I see value in, and I've worked very hard to be closer to builders because I don't think all of their concerns are meaningless or are focused on their bottom line. There's more to this debate than that. And if we don't get to it today, I'm happy to come back and we can really dig into some of that.
Definitely.
So coalition is ready to do more advocacy and ultimately spends a couple of years setting priorities, setting goals, and decides that the best way that they can be an advocate for the spray foam insulation industry is to separate from ACC and thank ACC robustly for forming a coalition and helping a group come together and see the power of collective advocacy. And it's been a great process to be involved with. You know, we've been our independent group for just over 3 months, and we've done a lot in those 3 months. A lot of things around governance and starting a new association, but we've also shown value to our members. We've brought every member along with us and are continuing to grow the market. We're hiring state lobbyists. We're doing all the things that the members support. So as it sits today, the coalition has 27 members. We have systems houses and suppliers. So we have the raw material manufacturers involved as well. And they come to the coalition to support their customer, which is the spray foam manufacturers, and to help support us as we think about advocacy goals to grow the market. And it's a great mix of folks that are energized and are ready to work together and think differently about spray foam, think differently about the energy codes, and to think differently about how to grow a market that we think provides the best in class solution for energy efficiency.
Huntsman goes and makes a $700 million investment in the spray foam industry to acquire Icynene, Lapola, and Demilec. And shortly after doing that, they called you up and said, Stephen, we need your help. Tell us about that, because there was a shocking amount of what do we do? Why aren't we selling more of this stuff? What did you learn in that conversation when you came over there with Huntsman?
Yeah, so the head of Huntsman Government Affairs and I knew each other prior to the purchase of the three systems houses. It was two systems houses because Icynene and Lapola had already merged with
Right.
private equity. I knew Huntsman through their general polyurethanes business. ACC has the Center for the Polyurethanes, and Huntsman's a member, and we were aware of each other. We weren't necessarily picking the phone up and calling each other, but I knew where to find him when I needed him. So he calls me and says, "We just spent almost $1 billion on spray foam. I know very little about this product. You know everything about the product. You're going to be my best friend until I can successfully advocate for this industry." So we spent many hours on the phone talking about what worked, what didn't work, how we could be more aggressive.
Mhm.
And ultimately that came to fruition with me leaving ACC to go work for Huntsman and be hyper focused on policy that would grow the spray foam market. We've learned a ton about the built environment and the decisions that are made to put in spray foam or to not put in spray foam. When I was leaving ACC and reaching, joining Huntsman, I thought long and hard about where the insulation industry is effective and where they aren't. And I wanted to do something that would allow me to put a mark on the insulation industry in a way that it hadn't previously been done. And many of my colleagues that represent different factions of the insulation industry are very well connected with the environmental energy efficiency community, the NGOs, Alliance to Save Energy, Sierra Club, all of those groups that traditionally are vocal advocates for fighting climate change, reducing building emissions. Pick your environmental flag of the day. I said where the insulation industry has not been effective is building relationships with the builders. So I've spent 2.5, 3 years now reaching out to the leading builders of America, the National Association of Home Builders, and different builders to just say, what do you care about?
Mm.
Why do you pick fiberglass insulation over spray foam? Why would you pick spray foam over fiberglass? And learn, this is not just about health and safety. It's not just about cost. It's not just about the time it takes to install a product. It's about the HVAC. It's about how the home was designed. There are massive decisions that go into selecting an insulation product, and it's far bigger than our value alone. I did not fully appreciate that up until the point when I started reaching out to builders. Consequently, I was also building a home at the time, and I learned firsthand all of the decisions that go in and all of the different government regulations that add a dollar here or there. If you look at regulation X, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but one regulation adding $15 or $20, a specialized piece of plastic that controls the flow of a faucet. How much does that really cost me as a builder? Yeah, it's probably a buck or two here or there, right? But the technology that went into creating it costs another, X amount. And then the next regulation, the next regulation, the next thing you know, the cost of your project has increased by tenfold just because of certain regulations. The aggregate effect of them is devastating. And that's what I really have learned to appreciate about builders is that it's not that they hate spray foam or they don't like fiberglass and they don't want to build an energy efficient home. They have to build a home that someone can afford. And the aggregate effect of electrification, of energy efficiency, of all of the different permitting and wastewater control, all of the stormwater management, all of these things add up. And ultimately the builder has to build a home in a way that they can comply with regulation, but it still has to be something that someone can afford. I do appreciate what the builders say about the cost of the energy code. It's real and they have to bear it. Now, I will also agree that it saves a homeowner money every month on their energy bills. And I've also debated with many builders that no one I know is buying homes without a mortgage, right? At the end of the day, many of us care about monthly cash flow, not the total cost of a home.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to qualify for the mortgage, and that's a real hurdle that many families may or may not face. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're saving money on your energy bills and it's paying for the insulation. And finding that sweet spot is very important.
Now, you had discovered in all of that discussion, Stephen, you had referred to something called the holy grail of work in the housing market. Tell us more about that. You said there is a difference. Do you want to spray one big house a couple of times a year, or do
Right.
you want what you describe as the holy grail of work? And I think all of us want to know what that is in the spray foam industry. What is that?
I think many folks know that spray foam is probably the number one insulation in the custom home market. Now, homes are a fraction of the homes that are built in this country.
Right.
The main building pathway is the subdivision, the production building. The what I call the holy grail of the insulation industry is having a production builder install your product in a 5,000 home suburb and a 10,000 home community. Uh, at the end of the day, I believe that the way that we get there is that we have a code that promotes air sealing equivalent or above our value. And ultimately, you're spraying several inches of foam into a home and moving on to the next one. If we build this code, you will likely spray the right amount of foam in every home, but you will be working night and day to keep up with the pace of growth because as of today, the fiberglass industry controls about 70% of the insulation market. A majority of that, if not all of it, is production building. And if we can spray homes and control 75% of the production building market, we would be a massive industry, and we would have trouble keeping up with growth without major changes in the industry, right? We would need how many more sprayers to keep up with that amount of work?
Correct.
And we're not there yet. So it will be an iterative process, and we'll work with SPFA to make sure that the contractor side of the world is growing with a rate that's equivalent to the manufacturer's output,
Right.
and we'll work together. It's going to be a great project to build this code that works better for spray foam, and it will take 2 or 3 years. It's not going to be an overnight process, but yeah, the holy grail is putting the right amount of foam in every home in a subdivision. That is where the industry will become a monster, and we're not there yet, but that's the long term vision.
So, if you're listening to what Stephen has just said, he laid out a huge revelation bomb just now. And I want to break it down for everybody into the most strictest, simplest terms. He is talking about a code book that is written for spray foam. Because we've all been up against this problem of R value. What's the R value? What's the R value of that stuff? And we've had to play this unfair game that the rules that are written right now in the building code, North America wide, Canada and the US, are written for this whole thing of R value. When we compare the amount of air leakage, we know that there is a performance problem with fibers or mineral fiber or cellulose. There is a differentiation between how it performs in the lab and in real world. And spray foam performs extremely well in the field. And therefore, why don't we have a custom rule book written so that we can put a little bit less of our product in and not have to price ourselves out of the market? Because when we're having to do this R49, R60, and R20, and R24, and R25, we're past diminishing return in a lot of cases. So why not have a rule book written that our product would be taken to the maximum of what it needs to do performance-wise, but also then that's the maximum yield of price? Meaning we come in, we spray not 6 inches, not even maybe 5 or 4, but maybe 2 or 3. That's what you're talking about a custom designed book of rules for us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what that exact inch value is,
Right.
we don't know yet. We're doing all of the research to get to that. And I imagine that it's probably in the 3 inch range, in open cell and maybe a little bit less in closed. We all know this. The problem is that we can't defend it.
Right.
And when we go to government or you go to a model code agency, you need to be able to defend it. And it's one thing for us to say, well, we built 1 million homes, we have the energy bills. That's not really substantiating the claim.
Correct.
So we plan to work with different engineering schools to do all of the modeling, all of the real world research. I would love to collect energy bills for different subdivisions, homes with spray foam, homes with fiberglass, and actually compare them. Build 2 homes, let someone live in them, and model and monitor the energy consumption. And I always know that there's going to be variables because the way that you do laundry and that me and my, two young kids and my wife do laundry is drastically different.
Yep.
That thing's running 24/7 in our house. But if you do this over a number of homes and large enough sample size, the variables like that fall apart, right? At the end of the day, if you have a couple thousand four-member families, you're going to be able to push out the families that have the young kids and run their dishwasher and their washing machine 6 times a day to the family that has, two teenagers that are never home. We can wash these variables away and get data that is as close to real world as possible. That's my vision. That's my goal, is to use the real world data. Everyone constantly tells me that, this modeling software, this one's not good enough. This one's better. This, use this one. Don't use that one. It's, modeling software is a solution for quick analysis and detailed analysis, but it's not perfect, right? Real world data is in my mind the way that we can really leverage how spray foam performs in the real world. It's there. We can pull the energy bills and really see how different homes perform with spray foam.
So what's the next goal then? So tell us, we're eager to hear. So it's real world data, and then you're going to get some independent lab results, test reports done. What is the next step in slaying this gigantic dragon that's in the room of changing perspective?
So we are working right now with the Congress to appropriate $2 million for independent third-party research on how spray foam performs as a moisture barrier, a insulation material, and a vapor/air barrier.
Right.
And to build that code that gets credit for all three, because right now all three of these features are treated separately in the code. They're all there,
Right.
but there is no plus up when you have one product that does all three.
Right.
So that's step one. Step two is we have a proposal to work with some of the rating associations to monitor some air leakage data and to use that real world data to analyze how homes with spray foam are performing. Those are our two big projects that we want to get underway this year. I imagine this will all lead to more research, right? I mean,
Right.
we have a monster amount of work to do, but we are being very iterative. We're taking the stage gate approach where we throw out a hypothesis, test the hypothesis, and let that guide where we go next. But those are the two things: analyze the real world leakage data, see what the benefit of spray foam is relative to other products, and start looking at benefits of multi-feature products and how they function and how a code should be built to quantify that benefit.
That's amazing. So we could be within a groundbreaking shift within the next, what you've spent, 3 years, 4 years? Inside of 5, for sure.
I would hope it's inside of 5. Some members want to do it tomorrow.
Yep, I do.
We have to get to, yeah, we all want to do it tomorrow, but we have to get to a point where we can advocate on data.
Yes.
Yes. Opinions only matter this much. The data is really where the conversation can start to snowball.
Absolutely. Before I retire from spray foam totally, I've still got a lot of time. I'm 47, so there's a big fight in me yet. I want to go at least 10 years. I want to see this thing defeated before I hang up my spurs. I want to hand it over to the next generation better than how I found it. And this R value thing has been the bane of our existence. It's so frustrating. I get so tired of having the conversations, and we've seen R values go up without any dramatic performance changes. Like, the cost is going up, but the home that I can spray this year compared to 4 years ago, it just costs more. It doesn't perform better.
And that's why I've tried to build the bridge with builders, because they know cost information in a way that we never will. They're making decisions on 15,000 homes a year.
Right.
I don't know a sprayer that sprays 15,000 homes a year. Do you?
No, that's not. We're going to need a lot more of growth. It's not possible. I just got off the phone yesterday with a viewer of the YouTube channel from Victoria, BC, and Vancouver, actually. I get the V's wrong. Vancouver. And he said that there's talk there about needing to go to 2x8. that they're going to want to see 8-inch thick walls, 2x8. And I get so frustrated because this technology, the phone, is getting thinner, smaller, faster, and can do more. Yet when it comes to insulation, we're going backwards. We're getting thicker, bigger, bulkier. We're not taking advantage of the new technology. And unfortunately, some of the spray foam industry has fallen back into that. It's like when I got into the industry, 2 and 3 inches was the norm. Now we're spraying 3 and 5 in closed cell foam, the more expensive of the two products. And it's like, folks, you're exactly what you're saying. If we don't put the brakes on this, we're going to be priced right out of the market to where we will, I mean, almost are in certain situations already. We're more of a novelty. We're only going to be using it in small, select areas and not getting more of a better product in the whole house, structure, building, whatever. Tell us a bit about resiliency. This is a major topic that people don't understand. It directly connects with the foam dome, the foam roof, non-vented roof details. You've had some amazing success recently here in California where you thought some sacred cows were never going to die and finally they fell over for you. What's going on with resiliency in roofs?
Yeah, resiliency is a great story for spray foam because the other insulation materials can't follow us down the resiliency path. They can match our value. We know that. It's just a fact of the product. Our value is our value regardless of the insulation. So, resiliency is a world where we can drastically separate ourselves from the competition. The spray foam industry has been challenged by modeling software that is specific to California for 15 to 20 years. Essentially, it boils down to that California didn't consider ducts in an unvented attic as conditioned space. And if you want to have a whole nother video on that one, we could probably spend hours going down why that is and the work that it took to unwind that. We are very close to unwinding that and having California create a what they call a high performance attic for spray foam. I don't want to put my cart too far ahead of my horse, but I'm very optimistic in California for the first time in a long time. We reached out to the California Energy Commission because they owed us a report in January. And my contact there said, "Hey, Stephen, very sorry. We're dealing with wildfire response. Do you mind if I take another week to get back to you?" And I said, "Absolutely. But are you aware of how spray foam can help slow the propagation of wildfires?"
Right.
And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, here's 2 sentences. I don't want to waste your time, but if you want to learn more, I'm happy to get my folks involved and we can put together a short presentation and just come talk to you." And she goes, "Can you come out next week?" And I said, "Well, no, I can't, but we can do it virtually." So we hopped on a call and just demonstrated how spray foam is a tool that can block soffits.
Right.
And when we talk about wildfires, we're not actually saying that the spray foam stops wildfire.
No.
We're saying that blocking the attic venting prevents embers from getting in an attic, and the embers getting in the attic prevents your house from catching on fire from the attic.
Right.
If you have a wall of fire that propagates to your home because your neighbor's house is on fire, you're going to have a problem, especially if I can jump out my window and touch my neighbor's house. I live in Washington, D.C. You live in close quarters. There are some limitations to this, but by and large, if you can block your soffits and close the venting in your attic, you will have a safer home in the wild and urban interface.
Yep.
This is something that FEMA has said for 10 years, maybe more. If you go to their website and look up block soffits, it's all there. What's not there is the connection to unvented attics.
Right.
And as you look at holistic code, resiliency is a part of that. And when you can tie resiliency to energy efficiency, you're getting a massive benefit. If you think about, it's great to just block your soffits with a vented attic and make sure the embers don't get into the attic. That's a great solution. But if you're going to rebuild a home that's hardened for wildfires and reducing emissions and saving the homeowners money, are you going to build a vented attic or an unvented attic? You're going to build the unvented attic. Your ducts are going to be in conditioned space, and you're going to get all the other benefits of spray foam insulation and a well-insulated home. So the governor of California, Governor Newsom, has put out an executive order that requires the Office of the State Fire Marshal to work with all of the different agencies that touch the code to work and develop code language that is holistic and says, how can energy efficiency and wildfire prevention coexist? And to me, the solution has to be an unvented attic. And it doesn't need to be a spray foam unvented attic. Do it with fiberglass. I don't care. Block the soffits and build an energy efficient attic, a modern energy efficient attic. And that's the message we're taking to California. Most of my advocacy in California, strangely, hasn't actually mentioned spray foam at all.
Mm.
It's just mentioned performance standards. If the attic can be this tight and have this much insulation in it, it will perform this way. We have intentionally not written or suggested that California write a unvented attic spray foam code. We want them to write an unvented attic requirement, right? And let the market decide what insulation's picked. I strongly believe that that would be spray foam because I
Yes.
think it's the easiest way to build an unvented attic.
Yes.
But we don't need to be that specific in code.
Right.
And when you take it back a step, it's harder for the fiberglass industry, cellulose industry, et cetera, to oppose a provision that's based on performance versus a provision that's based on a specific insulation.
Tactically
We
smart.
don't want the government picking government losers. We want the government to set standards
Yeah.
and let the market pick the best product based on performance. And I think spray foam wins in that argument every time.
Amen. And you're having amazing results in Florida too. You were talking at SPFA, you were giving a lecture about insurance rates. Now, the spray foam non-vented to the roof deck, there's been a lot of talk about it, and we're going to get into that in another different, totally separate episode about the negative press. But you've had some incredibly good success with insurance, the state, and spray foam non-vented. Tell us a bit about that. Like,
Yeah,
what's going on
absolutely.
there?
Yes. So when I was with Huntsman, we went and met with the governor's chief of staff and had a whole presentation about how great energy efficiency was
Yeah.
and spent, 15 slides talking about air sealing and spray foam and this and that. I happened to show the picture of Mexico Beach after Hurricane Michael in 2017. And I think everyone in the spray foam industry seen that picture. There's the one home, the Mexico Beach Sand Palace, that is just dramatically standing in this utter devastation. The roof deck is still, or sorry, the metal roof is in place. The roof deck is in place. I believe the only thing that happened was the stairs to the building were swept away in the water, and they were essentially designed to rip away from the home. But all the sidings there, it's incredible the way that the owner of this property built resiliency and home hardening into every piece of it. And the message that I've taken to every state that's asking about this is spray foam, just like wildfires, is not the only solution to preventing wildfires, but it's a tool that can be put into your toolkit to make a home harder, more resilient, and more likely to withstand disaster. So when I showed him the picture, he goes, wait, stop. What happened here? And I said, well, this home had spray foam on the roof deck. He goes, well, what does that do? And I said, well, if you can glue the home and the roof deck to the rafters, you essentially create a safer home because the roof deck is more likely to stay in place during the high wind event. And he goes, well, we have a huge problem in Florida where all the insurance companies are leaving the state because they're tired of paying out premiums during a disaster. I said, well, if every home had spray foam in Florida, you'd have homes that were surviving the storms. Now, it's not foolproof. I'm not saying spray foam's the best, the only product that you need to do. There's a whole host of solutions that will build a harder home, but it's definitely a key solution. So HB 799 was passed in Florida in 2023, and it required the state to amend a existing hurricane mitigation program that gives you credit if you put in stronger windows or hurricane straps and all these great things that you can do more easily at the construction of a home. But it didn't have a great solution for retrofits. Obviously, when you redo your roof deck, you can do all the advanced nailing techniques, but you don't always need to rip off your whole roof. So if you're not ripping off your whole roof and you want to make your roof deck stronger and you can't do hurricane straps because you don't want to renovate your whole house, like what are you left with? Well, I think the answer is spray foam. You can go into your attic and with how long does it take to spray an attic? A half day? and the homeowner stays out of the home for another 24 hours, under 36 hours, you can have a safer home with spray foam insulation. The statute was amended, and we're working with the Office of Insurance Regulation now to sort of monetize what that discount should be. And it's a slow process, but we think we're getting closer to the end, and I think that's a huge opportunity for spray foam throughout the entire Gulf of America, coast of the Gulf of America. Let me say it properly now that we've changed the name. So it's a huge opportunity to put in place public policy that is a win-win for the homeowner and the insurance company. The insurance company is less likely to write a premium, and the homeowner gets a safer, better home that's more energy efficient.
Right.
It's a holistic solution. So we worked, Senator Martin, that was one of the co-sponsors of that bill. He represents Fort Myers, and Hurricane Ian came through there and devastated a community outside of Fort Myers called Babcock Ranch, and every home in that community has spray foam insulation in it.
Wow.
And the developer said that the reason that that community fared so well in Hurricane Ian was directly because of the spray foam insulation.
Wow.
So we have a huge win in Fort Myers with spray foam. We have the Mexico Beach Sand Palace, and the Panhandle that have shown in these two massive storms that homes with spray foam, time and time again, outperform homes without spray foam in the resiliency space. And I think folks are starting to wake up to this, and we're going to see more policy about the benefits of spray foam throughout the sort of hurricane regions of the U.S.
Did you say down in Florida that the state was having to underwrite if the insurance company left, that they had to underwrite it?
Yeah, they have a state-sponsored insurance company called Citizen. So if you can't get insurance because no one will insure you, the state provides it.
Right. So the state was very interested then in hearing what you had to say about
Yeah.
resiliency and spray foam, right?
Yeah, because they're essentially underwriting the insurance policies in the areas where none of the real insurance companies want to operate. So they have this thing called Citizens Insurance. And it's the state.
And more people need to know about that. Not that that's going on, just knowing that they're an ally with spray foam, not an antagonist. Because many people are thinking, oh, well, insurance companies are fleeing from spray foam. You got spray foam, I don't want to have nothing to do with you. Here, this is an antidote to that. It's very much different.
Yeah, the states definitely wanted to be involved.
So, in sort of wrapping up, then, we've got an amazing future ahead in spray foam. You're part of a young group, so am I. I don't view myself as old yet. I think mid 40s is still the new 30s. But one of the
There you
things
go.
that we're promoting right now is the next generation needs to be coming into this industry. And we need the 20 somethings and the 30 somethings to have rigs and to have businesses. Like you just said it, is the industry ready to respond? If we get our values switched overnight to our new code, is the industry ready to spray 15,000 houses extra in a year? The answer is no. So we're going to have to grow the industry. And I think this is a very powerful thing about talking about the high paying jobs that spray foam is. Like you can have a very good life and be very well paid. It's a great success story where else can you come in and get education, on the job training, and have an amazing ability to make six figures of income. And that's a story that we want to tell out there and get people interested. Because you know what? If you're in your 20s, and our producer Ronnie's always saying, gotta get more young people on the show. Can't all be gray hair. Can't all be gray hair. Where are you getting the young guys on the show? And this is exactly it. We want to appeal to the next generation that's coming in and tell those stories. Spray foam is a legitimate, amazing career to be in. It's not a sunsetting industry.
Right. I'm very optimistic about the future of our industry. I think you have a great vision of the benefits of being a spray foam contractor. We met with the deputy chief of staff for Governor Kemp in Georgia, and a local spray foamer found out we were going because he grew up with Governor Kemp. And he said, I'm going to come with you. And I said, yeah, you are, sure, come along. And the only thing he said in that meeting was essentially exactly what you just said. We did the energy efficiency pitch. We talked about the benefits of spray foam and all of the things that you and I have covered today, and the pitch that we all know. And the contractor just said, I have 6 guys or 5 or 6 guys that spray foam, and they all make 120 grand a year.
Wow.
And the 5 guys on the other side of the table, or their jaws hit the table.
Mhm.
And they said, "How long does it take to do that?" It's like 2, 3, 4 years. Depends on how hard you wanna work. But if you can get in the industry and make above 6 figures, pretty quickly if you're really dedicated to the craft. So, um, the jobs that this community provides, I think, is a reason to be optimistic. But I think there's so much growth opportunity with building a code that is built around spray foam.
Yes.
If I handed you a piece of paper and said, "Write a building code," you wouldn't start with R value.
No.
We all know that. We would start with air sealing, and then we do, talk about making sure that the HVAC system and the schedule or manual J calculations, all of those things work together. Then you would look and make sure the insulation's right and the moisture control's right and the resiliency's right. I mean, these are all things that we know are valuable to the built environment and the consumer, but we're not building a code. We're not using a code that works like that. Or we're using a code that was built on a test that was created for the fiberglass industry.
Right.
The R value test wasn't created for spray foam. Does it does that mean it doesn't work for spray foam? No, I'm not saying that, but the test was tailor-made for the fiberglass industry. And the code is essentially, to this day, built around that. And folks are going to say, well, U factor was elevated in the 2021 energy code. Of course it was. I'm not being naive here, but the idea that the U factor is still based on R value, right? We all know that as well. So let's not be silly here. So yeah, getting a code right is a huge opportunity for spray foam. But on top of that, the reason that I'm optimistic is that I've spent the last 3 years meeting builders, and I will tell you, I have not met a builder that has not admitted to me that spray foam is the best insulation product.
Right.
What they say is that it's more expensive than the alternatives. So that's a huge opportunity. And when you hear it, it stings. It hits you in the chest. It's like getting kicked by a donkey. You're just like, I spent all this time, saying it's the best product, but I don't need to. Everybody knows that. What we need to do is to build a regulation around house home construction that promotes the benefits of spray foam in a way that it does not currently. And if we get that right, this industry will take off like I was going to say wildfire, but that's probably a poor analogy given the things that we've talked about today. So it will have explosive growth. Is a I guess what I can leave you with, but it's great. My new coalition, or sorry, I take actually let's edit that. The new coal. I'd like to say mine. The new coalition is excited. The board is excited. The members are excited. Everyone has a shared vision of how spray foam can grow in the market and ultimately replace fiberglass as a preeminent insulation in the production building market, that holy grail that we talked about. And we are all going to succeed together. We aren't going to fail. This is a project, a vision that only has one outcome, and it's growth. And I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm very honored that the industry asked me to come back and serve as the first president of this organization. And I'm going to work with the board. I'm going to work with contractors. This isn't about me. It isn't about one organization, the Spray Foam Coalition, or Spray Foam Worldwide, or Spray Polyurethane Foam Alliance, or the Insulation Contractors of America. No, I want to work with everybody. This is those that want to see spray foam grow are happy. I'm happy to work with them. This isn't there are lines in the sand that have existed for many years, and I hope the waves can wash them all away, and we can all link arms and work together on this huge project that's out in front of us of creating a code that works for spray foam.
Well, I couldn't have said it best. I told you at the beginning of this that this was a treat to sit down with Stephen. I mean, I was so excited to have the chance to sit down with you, and one of many. Like, we're going to have you back multiple times because
Absolutely.
this is such a broad subject, and there's so many hot button points coming up that we don't have time for here today, and we don't want to do it just once. I think many times throughout the year, we're going to talk about many things and keep people updated. What can the rank and file spray foam guys do to help support you and to support what's going on? They're going to hear this and go, all right, that's great. What can I do? What can I do to be a part of this or help?
So answer the calls that come out from SPFA or from Spray Foam Coalition to support grassroots advocacy. And
Yes.
for those that aren't familiar with that term, what we mean is we want to show that we have folks that are impacted by the change in public policy in the districts where it matters. Let's say we are in Sacramento and we're talking about unvented attics with CEC. If we can have 30 contractors come to a stakeholder workshop and say, this is good policy because of this, because it helps employ 15 people, it helps reduce emissions by X amount in this area, or here's some real world experience that I have with spray foam that made a customer's experience better. Those are stories that I can't tell. Folks know who I am. They know what I am, and I show up to government hearings in a suit and a tie, and I look like the quintessential lobbyist. But that's my role. My role is not to be the everyday man. It's to be the subject matter expert on spray foam and public policy. I need the everyday man or woman that is participating in this industry to support that advocacy through letters, through testimony, through just supporting what we're doing. And those calls will come out from different organizations as we start to lobby more and more states on creating things like the prescriptive insulation requirement for the unvented attic. And when these things drop, we'll need support from the whole industry.
Amazing. Well, there you have it, folks. The future is bright.
Thank you for the platform. This is great. This is something that I plan in my new position to be more vocal and to have a platform that hits a bigger part of the industry than my footprint. You know, my footprint is 15 manufacturers that all have 20 to 100 employees. I don't actually have the economic data at my fingertips here, but our manufacturing footprint is not where we're biggest. We're biggest at the contractor level. So thank you for having me and allowing me to tell this story to a broader segment of the industry than I've previously connected with. This is awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. We're going to have you on multiple times. And then to follow up with that, Think Spray Foam is going to be the preeminent media group that is telling the story, dedicated.
It's going to be great.
A dedicated stage to telling the story about spray foam across North America. So, Stephen, thanks for being on. We'll get you on right away soon. Have a good day.
Yeah, looking forward to coming back. This is great. Thank you so much.
You bet.